Welcome to Beyond Talking Points from Little Visionaries Bookstore. I'm Bridgitte Jackson-Buckley, and today I'm speaking with Eve Marie Ford. Eve is licensed in marriage and family therapy and certified as a well-being coach and the founder and executive clinical director of Eve's Place of Peace Center for Wellbeing in Encino, California. Our topic for today is resilience, building inner strength to weather life's challenges. Eve, with everything going on this past year with COVID, the changes, challenges, and uncertainty that many people face, I thought it would be helpful to have a conversation about resilience, and just how to cultivate it, how to build it, and just what can help you weather such uncertainty.
Right.
So we know that the textbook definition of resilience is an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. But how do you define resilience?
It's so interesting the way you read the way you read the definition when you emphasize ease, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we both know if you live long enough, resilience is not something that always comes easy. I'm going to say for most people, and depending on how big or huge that task or whatever somebody is going through will make it even more difficult. So while the definition certainly gives you a point of reference, I think that when I think of resilience, I think of courage. Courage comes to mind, and so does faith. Faith in something greater than you that pushes you to do something that you know on the other side is good for you. Faith that if I keep going, that thing is going to come to fruition. Or this too shall pass away. And when I think of courage, it takes courage to move and to walk in that faith. So that's how I guess when I think of resilience, that's what comes to mind for me.
Well, I really like that you said courage. I mean, I couldn't agree more with you because courage can sometimes look like, what we see on the news, the man on the subway platform who jumps in to save someone that's about to get hit by the subway or runs into a burning building or something like that. But in these times, courage can be very small. It could just be showing up authentically when you're afraid and your knees are shaking and you don't know how to take the next step forward, but you're there.
But you're there.
And you're willing.
Mm-hmm. And you're willing. And that's what it is. It's like the willingness to show up. I like to say first for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when you show up for yourself, you're showing up for others.
Absolutely. Okay, so what about triggers? Let's talk a minute about triggers, because this can be a highly triggering time. So what are they and how can a crisis exacerbate them?
So really triggers are emotions that show up. Usually they are the strong negative emotions that we're talking as far as triggering. And they come from a place usually of complex trauma or just trauma that you've had. And so if you are experiencing let's say a poor emotion, it's triggering something from your past. That would be the triggering emotion. It's reminding you of something from your past. And when you're going through something and you're not able to differentiate that this is a new situation as opposed to an old situation, the mind has the memory of the past and the body has the emotional memory that pulls you back into that particular emotion. So that's usually very difficult when you're faced with challenges to differentiate that and then to move in something contradictory, even though you know that contradictory action is good for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you said a couple things that caught my attention: the complex trauma, and then also when I think of triggers, I think of trauma, unhealed wounds.
Unhealed wounds, shame is shame.
Mm-hmm.
Something making you angry when it's really pain. A lot of times men show up in anger when it's really something that they're being triggered from feeling disrespected or not cared for or not loved, and they show up in all this anger and it's a trigger for them.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned COVID, being isolated, not being able, especially for those people who are extroverted, and now I can't go out and get fed by others. That's a real trigger because now I'm totally isolated. A lot of people suffer with depression and things of that nature during COVID, and having to work through that and find new ways of operating within their sense of self. If you're an extrovert, finding new ways to connect with people, you know?
Yeah, so even though you're already totally uncomfortable because you're triggered, but trying something new. But then
Correct.
the other point that you mentioned, the body memory,
Yes.
that is key because like with COVID or in, it brings up a lot of like root chakra issues, survival, fear,
Correct.
safety, what am I
Correct.
going to do? How are we going to eat? Where are we going to live? So, and when you're so triggered in fear, it's hard to access, I would say, to just make a good decision.
Correct.
It's hard to be clear. So that's why I wanted to talk about triggers, because it seems like these days we could easily be on a hairpin trigger. The slightest
Correct.
little thing, and you're just like reacting, like just going off almost like a bomb or something.
Correct. And I think it's important to own where you are and to really get to know yourself, right? So you know what triggers you when you really get to know yourself. And the first step in doing that is becoming aware of yourself. Our
Yes.
guidance system, when we talk about, like you mentioned, yes, the body has the emotional memory. And in your body, you will feel certain things. It's important for you to recognize your guidance system is trying to guide you away from something or towards something. If you're feeling really uncomfortable about where you are, well, that's your guiding system trying to get your attention. That maybe you're not in the right place. Maybe I need to be doing something over here. It's really checking in with yourself. What is really going on? Why am I being triggered? Where's this trigger coming from? That's you really getting to know yourself.
Right, right. And when you were talking, it reminded me really quickly that of a story of a couple months ago that I was triggered, and the trigger seems like it's about what's happening in front of you, but
Correct.
it has nothing to do with that. That is simply the trigger alerting you that there's something there within you. And it could be something so simple, like this time, like I said, of challenge, uncertainty, fear, where you're just on edge, because people like to feel in control, like they know what's going to happen. And when you're outside of that, you can be very fearful. And so we were getting passports for my children, and my son forgot his ID, and we were right at the window. After we had talked about it that morning, walked into the post office and walked up to the window, he forgot the ID. And I just went from like 0 to 10, just standing there. Like I was so irritated. And I thought, okay. In that moment, what was just flashing through my mind was like, this response to this situation is completely disproportionate. Like this has
Correct.
nothing to do with him. And it's like, I wanted so badly to just, why didn't you? I told you you're not listening to me. But I just was able to maintain silence and just say, okay, we will come back. And so then, even though I was really holding myself back, by the time we all got back into the car, I realized, wow, like I really felt like this was all about I wasn't being listened to. So that trigger of ID at a post office had nothing to do. And
With
so
him
it just,
forgetting it, it was about you not feeling
yeah,
heard, which most
yeah.
likely came from your family of origin. So, yes,
Yes.
yes. My last client before we came on was mirroring something that I had experienced in my life that makes me feel grounded, and that is when you have a level of insecurity based on what your home life looks like as a child, as an adult. The consequences of that a lot of times is you become very specific and particular about how you like things at home, and everything has its place and everything's going to be in its place, and then you feel a level of security. But not everybody lives like that or had that journey, so the people who live like you don't see what you see.
Yes. Yes.
And that's a real trigger, right?
Yeah.
You come into your home now as an adult, and things are chaos. And that's what she was talking about. I just feel ungrounded. And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about the people who are creating. You feel like they're doing this to you, and it's not about you.
No.
This is about something bigger. So let's look at you.
Yes, so you tapped on that. My next question is, and you touched on this a little bit about being aware of what's going on inside of
Correct.
you. Like that is so important. It's
it
just
is.
so important. Like whenever something is happening outside, really just bring it back in. Bring it back in, to choose how you're going to respond. But my next question is, so what is the first hurdle to overcome fear and the mental and emotional triggers that can really push us into a negative reaction during a challenge situation? And like I said, I think you alluded to this earlier.
So what is the first trigger, the first hurdle? And I think that hurdle is, and you spoke to it as well in your beautiful example with your son, is you had enough space to be aware of yourself in that moment, that you didn't go in on your son, but you stopped and you took a pause. You took a moment to just breathe and ask yourself what's really going on here. That's a split-second moment that could make all the difference in the world in yourself and how that day is going to play out. But also, it plays into the sense of self of your son, because had you come down on him as if he was doing something wrong, right? Now he's wounded and looking at himself. So to answer that, I think you've answered it. It is. That first level is being aware and stopping, not reacting, taking a pause, and then responding appropriately.
Yes, because it's so important. I think the self-awareness is, it is pivotal here, because that split second moment of self-awareness is what can pass on the pathology, the illness, the trauma, the wound, or what can be the course of action to take a new path, to stop it, to really engage in the healing
for yourself. Generational, because now you're not passing that on.
Wonderful. Okay, so like now when you're in a challenging situation, whether it's COVID, whether it's something like you lost your job, an illness in your family, or perhaps yourself, how can the urges and impulses brought about by the tension of a crisis help us to go beyond just means of stress reduction, like I just don't want to be stressed, to instead build skills to adapt to hardship?
So it's interesting. That's a really good question. And it's very difficult, challenging, when you're in the midst of what I call a dark night of the soul.
Well, now that's the truth.
Yeah.
You got to dig deep.
Shift. It's hard to shift. And I'm not going to pretend to be anything other than who I am and what I bring. And who I am is first a spirit. And so I bring that spirit to all challenges. And I've learned over the years that challenges, those dark nights of the soul, are designed for where we're going. They're designed, that my go through is designed for you. So therefore, it's in the midst of that, grabbing hold of something that's greater than you. Now, I don't know what people's belief systems are, but it is grabbing hold to a divine, a power that's greater than you, to give you hope that there is a future, that there is a light out there, that this too, whatever this is temporary like everything else. This too will pass. This too will change. It's like a knowing inside of you that this go through again is not just this moment. It's just happening in this time. It's not going to stay forever. And that's a knowing that we can walk in. At least that's a knowing I walk in. And that's what I teach as a coach.
Yes. I hear you, because that urge and that inner impulse that's and sometimes it can feel very small, very small, very slight, but there's this small aspect within you that knows that things are going to be okay, even if okay means not what you would want it to look like or not what you
Correct.
thought it would look like. But okay, meaning you're going to go on, you're going to continue, this too shall pass. And in my experience, if you can just choose to believe that internal feeling, regardless of how small it is, that it starts to expand over time, the more you pay attention to that, what is speaking within you.
And it's interesting because in having our talk today, I had clients first thing this morning, 7 this morning, and I shared with one that we were talking about something. I said, "Oh, that's so interesting because I have a talk today on resilience." She said, "Well, you know what? What I can honestly say, and it was so genuine, is that I remember being in a place of such destitute, but something inside me just kept saying, put just one foot in front of the other today." And sometimes that foot in front of the other was so small, but I still put one foot in front of the other. And over time, and literally, she said it took me years to get out of that space. But because I kept putting one foot in the front of the other, when I look back, it was me making those steps. It was me taking that step. And that we don't always know how long we're going to be in that space or what it's going to look like, that journey getting past it. But if we just keep doing our part, that even if it's really small, we just keep doing our part, then you will see the light. You will see the change. You'll be able to look back and know, okay, I did my part and things did change. And now I'm in this better place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, now I'm curious, Eve, what is the example? Like, can you give us an example of the difference of internal dialogue of someone who is resilient, cultivating resilience, and someone who is just kind of moving through the drudgery of the
I
challenge?
sure can. And I'm gonna give it to you in terms that are very, how could I put it, bold. A person who does not give up tells themselves, their internal dialogue is failure is not an option. Well, I can maybe not have that outcome that I was looking for. I'm going to course correct because failure is not an option. I've been there before, and failure is not an option. And that person who is stuck, can we say, in the muckety muck of the challenge, their internal dialogue is defeat. They don't see any hope. They're too afraid to try. They're already defeated. So they don't get up to even know what's on the other side. It's almost like they find contentment in this ugly place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the fear is so great that it keeps them there.
Inside
and that's
the box.
why it's like, you know what? Fear can be there, but we got to do it anyway. We do it afraid. Do it afraid.
Yeah. Been there.
Right? We've all been there. And so what you say when you say I'm doing it afraid is giving up is not an option. Failing and not getting to the other side is not an option. So like I like to tell my daughter, I say, baby, be slow but steady and you will get there.
Oh. Well, I was just about to ask you what parting advice you would have for someone going through a difficult time, but that was just it.
That was it.
Go slow and steady,
Slow
and
and
you will
steady.
get there.
And you will get there. Yes, because even on that slow and sturdy and that slow but steady journey, you're building hope along the way because it is a journey. And you start seeing, oh, the light's getting brighter. You're leaving what's left behind. So that slow but steady, you can start seeing it again. You can start seeing, that hope again. You start feeling that hope again.
Yes.
Yeah, just keep at it, slow but steady.
Moving in the courage.
Moving in the courage.
I'm not even surprised. I knew I was going to enjoy talking with you today. I knew it. I was so excited to speak with you. You always have such rich insights and perspectives, Eve. So
thank you.
I do hope that you enjoyed listening to our conversation this afternoon with Eve Marie Ford. Eve can be reached at Eve's Place of Peace Center for Wellbeing, which provides psychotherapy, process groups, and workshops. And Little Visionaries is an independent bookstore that, beyond selling books, hosts community-focused interviews and author events. So remember, the best way to support your local indie bookstore is simply by purchasing a book. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bridget.